Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the calls from Sir Chris Hoy to change the advice on testing for prostate cancer to encourage more younger men to be checked.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to thank Douglas Ross for raising what is an incredibly important issue, and also to pay tribute to Sir Chris Hoy for his courage and his leadership in sharing his journey with prostate cancer. My thoughts are with him, with Sarah and his family at this time. All men over 50 can ask their GP for a PSA test once the benefits and risks have been explained. And I welcome the review of the Scottish Cancer Referral Guidelines that include PSA testing, and that will be published in spring 2025. I've also written to the UK National Screening Committee in support of their review of a case for a prostate cancer screening programme.
Ross.
Thank you. Can I associate myself with the remarks of the Cabinet Secretary? The strength and bravery of Chris Hoy being so open about his prostate cancer diagnosis has already led to more people coming forward to be tested, and has also made people more comfortable discussing the issue. And it's in that spirit that I speak for the first time about how prostate cancer has affected my own family. A year ago, my dad was diagnosed and had a PSA level of 168. And for context, PSA levels of around 4 and below are considered the normal, so we knew we were dealing with something very serious. Last Christmas was one of great anxiety and worry for our family, but a year on, thanks to the great support from Forest Health Centre, Mr Lamb at the Urology Department in ARI, the rest of the teams at the hospital, and the outstanding support provided by everyone at Clan House in Aberdeen, where Dad recently had his radiotherapy, his PSA is now 0.12. So does the Cabinet Secretary agree that with more men hopefully being diagnosed earlier due to the efforts of Chris Hoy, they can also be reassured, as we can testify as a family, of the excellent care in our NHS and from the amazing charities that support people with cancer and their families?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I first of all thank Douglas Ross for sharing a very personal family story, and one that will be felt and shared by many other families across Scotland, and also share in the tribute that he wished to pay to our National Health Service colleagues and also the community and voluntary sector organisations very familiar with Clan House in Aberdeen, given my links in Orkney, that Mr Ross will be familiar. I think Mr Ross is absolutely right that the work that has been done, the leadership and courage that has been shown by Chris Hoy has already had benefits. I heard this morning that Jones from Prostate Cancer Research, a trustee of the Prostate Cancer Research, speaking to Emma Barnett on the Today programme about his personal journey, and the fact that campaigns like Movember, that myself and his colleague Miles Briggs are participating in, helping to release the stigma, encourage people to come forward and talk about really personal, uncomfortable areas of health is critically important. And so my thoughts are absolutely with Mr Ross and his family, but also with Sir Chris Hoy and his family as he shows the leadership that he has done to see more men coming forward for these tests.
Question number 2, Maurice Golden. Just excuse me a moment. Could we have Maurice Golden's?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it anticipates the benefits to Scotland will be of a fully circular waste management system.
Mr Alistair Allen.
A fully circular waste management system would keep valuable materials flowing in our economy, reduce reliance on virgin resources, reduce emissions and promote green jobs in repair, reuse and recycling. It is therefore welcome news that statistics from SEPA show that in 2023, both the amount of household waste generated and the carbon impact of Scotland's household waste were at their lowest level since records began in 2011. Our Circular Economy Scotland Act 2024 and draft Circular Economy and Waste Route Map set out actions to develop a more circular economy in Scotland by 2030.
Maurice Golden.
Thank the Minister for that answer. SEPA figures also noted that household recycling rate has increased by 0.15% last year. SEPA figures also stated that more than 146,000 tonnes of Scottish waste has been shipped to developing countries since 2019. One destination was Turkey, which a BBC investigation found to have dumped and burnt British waste. Can the Minister confirm if all waste sent abroad is fully traceable, adhering to a duty of care compliance to ensure that this does not happen to Scottish waste?
Minister.
Well, the member will be aware that the proportion of waste that we are talking about here is very small, but yes, there are safeguards that the Scottish Government seeks to apply in those unusual circumstances. It should be said that the total household waste in Scotland is down by 26,000 tonnes a year, that landfill for biodegradable waste is being phased out, and that the kind of solutions that the member refers to are unusual rather than usual.
Thank you. Question number 3, Oliver Mundell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it is providing to local residents to take forward a replacement river crossing in Annan following storm damage in 2021 in light of the findings of the recently completed feasibility study.
Minister Alistair Allen.
Although the footbridges are not the responsibility of Dumfries and Galloway Council or indeed the Scottish Government, the Council did provide £66,000 to support the recovery of the two bridges and a further £50,000 of capital funding to A Tale of Two Bridges community group to deliver an options appraisal exercise, and the Scottish Government reimbursed the Council for 50% of the total funding provided.
Oliver Mundell.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Clearly, this is a huge undertaking now for a community group to put in place a bridge at significant expense. And following the First Minister's visit and the welcome funding from the Scottish Government, I wondered if the Minister would commit to convening a meeting of stakeholders, including the local authority, South of Scotland Enterprise and other potential funders to drive the project forward.
Minister.
Well, as the member, I think, is recognising the two bridges concerned, which I understand to be the Cuthbertson Memorial and the Diamond Jubilee bridges, are not in the hands of the public sector. But I am indeed, as a member alludes to there, sure that officials at the Scottish Government end are only too willing to meet with the communities concerned to find what solutions may exist. I am conscious that the loss of the bridges has created problems, I think, for people living to the west of the river. We have, as a government, also a bridge maintenance fund which has contributed £243,000 to bridges in Dumfries and Galloway. I'm sure further conversations will be had.
Question number 4, Jackie Baillie.
Ask the Scottish Government what further policy changes it plans to bring forward to address reported concerns regarding the National Care Service Scotland Bill.
Minister Marie Todd.
The Scottish Government remains committed to the plans for a national care service and to working with lived experience and stakeholder partners to design and implement social care support improvement as quickly and as effectively as possible. I need to take some time to fully reflect those views in our approach, and in order to get this right for the people of Scotland, I wrote to the Health and Social Care and Sport convener yesterday, setting out that I do not intend to start Stage 2 on the 26th of November.
3 years on, 3 different health secretaries later, this is now the longest-running bill in the Parliament, directionless, unworkable and criticised by experts as policy-making on the hoof. The SNP government is kicking the can down the road because they know it is destined to fail. But we can deliver the things that will make a real difference to social care right now. We have the power to deliver a right to respite care using the Carers Act, fair pay and ethical commissioning using procurement reform, and Annan's Law through the Social Care and Social Work Improvement Scotland regulations. So at a time when people's care packages are being cut, will the Minister stop wasting money and time on a failed bill and make the changes we all agree with right now?
Minister.
The member will be aware we have not been waiting for a national care service to resolve the current issues. The Scottish Government is working right now to tackle the current issues that do not need primary legislation. The social care system in Scotland, as everyone agrees, needs urgent reform to improve people's lives and to ensure consistency of care across Scotland. We've worked constructively and intensively with stakeholders across the past 2 years, and I've been very clear in my discussions with stakeholders that there is space for dialogue and agreement around the provisions in the bill. I personally have heard directly from hundreds of people who are accessing social care. And the Bill team have heard from thousands of people who are currently accessing social care across Scotland, and they are being badly let down by our current system. Thousands have told us that social care and community health needs to change. We collectively all have a responsibility to act on those concerns and to make every effort that we improve the lives of the communities that we serve.
Brief supplementary, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A strong workforce is vital in the delivery of high-quality social care, which is why a key part of a national care service is improving working conditions for carers. Alarmingly, over the last few weeks, we have heard loudly and clearly concerns of stakeholders, such as the Coalition of Care Providers, about the UK Labour Government's plans to increase employers' national insurance contributions, which they have said could be catastrophic for many voluntary sector care providers. Can the Minister provide an update on the estimated impact of the UK Government's increases in national insurance contributions will have on the care sector in Scotland?
Brief response, Minister.
I agree that a strong social care workforce is necessary, and I want to put on record my thanks to all social care workers for the fantastic job they do. I absolutely agree with the member that it's very worrying the impact that the national insurance increase will have on our social care providers. There are over 1,000 care providers throughout Scotland, and it is not easy to estimate the impact it will have on each of them individually. We are looking closely at this issue as a matter of urgency and liaising with the sector, including the Coalition of Care Providers Scotland.
Thank you. Question number 5, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action is taken to improve data collection on gender inequality.
Minister Colcap-Stewart.
Thank you. The Scottish Government is committed to improving the collection of data, collection and analysis of data on gender inequality. To build the strongest evidence base, we continue to advance quantitative and qualitative and lived experience evidence collection. In the Equality Data Improvement Programme, 28 of the 45 actions relate to improvements of sex and gender evidence, demonstrating the breadth of action across government. We recognise that there is more work to be done to improve that collection, analysis and use of data and evidence on gender inequality, and we are continuing to work with our stakeholders to do so.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the Minister for that response. Last week, during committee, I asked the Minister how the decision to include gender instead of sex came about. Instead of answering my question, the Minister asked her officials to respond. I still did not receive an answer to my question. We also found out last week that of the 24 genders produced by the Scottish Government, there were 14 categories that nobody has indicated that they belong to. Therefore, I would like to ask the Minister, why was the term gender instead of sex used to collect data on inequalities between men and women?
Minister.
Thank you for that question. I think I said at the evidence session that I would get back to the member on that. I do want to just refer to the 24 genders. I have answered a question on that before. The Scottish Government recently updated its guidance to public bodies on collecting data on sex and gender to include a coding framework for free text responses. The framework is there to help official statistics producers to categorise people who identify as trans and have completed an open response question about their trans status. The categories were developed based on responses to the question in the Census 2022. And as I have said before, the framework should not be interpreted to mean that there are a particular number of genders. It should only be used as a guide to classify responses to the recommended trans status question in the surveys.
Thank you. Question number 6, Megan Gallagher.
To ask the Scottish Government what conversations they have had with their UK ministerial counterparts regarding the changes made to agricultural property relief on inheritance tax.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Disappointingly, we have had no advance notice or engagement from the UK Government over this change. I would urge them to now engage with us to ensure that their plans properly account for the distinct features of Scotland's agricultural sector, since family farms, tenant farms and crofting are all key parts of rural life here in Scotland. Ultimately, the Scottish Government believes the inheritance tax powers should be devolved to this Scottish Parliament, so that the tax can be redesigned and tailored for the Scottish context, which the proposals from the UK Government simply do not reflect. We want to see a tax system that supports rather than hinders orderly succession planning and transfer of land to the next generation of custodians.
Megan Gallagher.
Last night, this Parliament sent a clear message to the Labour Government by backing a Scottish Conservative motion calling for the family farm tax to be scrapped. And I congratulate my colleague Tim Eagle on his efforts. Rather than having any sympathies with their farmers, especially farmers recovering from cancer, Labour's response has been to tell farmers to get their affairs in order. With the majority of the Scottish Parliament against this new tax, will the Minister use his authority to demand in their next meeting with their Labour counterparts that the family farm tax simply has to go?
Minister.
As the member has pointed out, we do have intergovernmental meetings with UK counterparts. This issue will absolutely be raised, but I think it's also worth pointing out, Presiding Officer, that DEFRA, the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in Westminster, have also confirmed that they were not engaged during this policy development. So I think it's absolutely essential that the UK Government now reverses this proposal and allows us to have a proper consultation to find out the effects on this damaging tax.
Question number 7, Liz Smith.
Ask the Scottish Government what engagement it has had with the hospitality and tourism sectors to promote safety on Scotland's mountains in winter 2024-25.
Minister Marie Todd.
Scotland has an enviable reputation for having world-class hills and mountains, but we want to reduce the number of lives lost each year. We work in partnership with stakeholders, including Visit Scotland, to provide people with safe opportunities to enjoy the outdoors. The Scottish Government provides £312,000 annually to Scottish Mountain Rescue, and Sport Scotland invests around £2 million per annum of Scottish Government and National Lottery funding to help ensure the safety of mountain users. Mountaineering Scotland and Scottish Mountain Rescue's #ThinkTwitter campaign is supported by Visit Scotland, who also provide advice on winter mountain safety on their website.
Liz Smith.
Thank you to the Minister. That's helpful, but nonetheless the Minister will be very aware of the conditions during Storm Ashley, when 15 members of Loch Aber Mountain Rescue were deployed on Ben Nevis to rescue, in the most atrocious weather, a number of people who should quite frankly not have been out in the mountains. And she will also be aware of my colleague Edward Mountain's calls to have a fresh safety message following the projection that 2024 could be one of our worst years for mountain safety. And can I draw the Minister's attention to what happens in other countries? And I would cite particularly Switzerland and France, of which I have some considerable experience, when in hotels and in tourist outlets they make a point of being in people's rooms and in various lobbies to tell people exactly what is going to happen on the mountains, with sufficient access to webcams and specialist advice about what the weather is going to be. And they are very helpful in making people aware of what the circumstances are that they might take. Could Scotland also do the same?
Minister.
So I'd be very content to meet and hear directly from the member her ideas on how to improve mountain safety. Undoubtedly, we have an incredible asset in our hills and mountains. My own constituency is blessed with some incredible climbing opportunities, but we need to ensure that people enjoy them safely. And we do work with Police Scotland, with the sporting community and with Mountain Rescue, and I'd be happy to engage with members across the chamber to ensure that we get those messages right.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes general questions. We move on to the next item of business, which is First Minister's questions. Question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A year ago, almost to the day, Michael Matheson stood in this chamber to deliver wholly unbelievable excuses about billing taxpayers for his £11,000 iPad bill. It seems the SNP have learned nothing from that scandal. Michael Matheson misused taxpayers' money to watch football on his iPad. Neil Gray did it to watch football in person. The SNP have substituted one shamed Health and Social Care Secretary for someone even less serious. Neil Gray charged taxpayers for ministerial limos to watch his football team. So what is it with SNP ministers taking taxpayers for a ride?
First Minister.
President Officer, it's always been the case that ministers will attend sporting, cultural, societal and community events around the country. Indeed, I would expect ministers to do that because they have got to be in contact with various stakeholders around the country. So ministers will continue to engage on issues of importance with groupings around the country.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. These luxury cars, they're not free taxis to the football for SNP ministers. Neil Gray claims he attended these games to discuss essential government business. He tells us that the social impact
Mr Finlay, just a second. Can I just ensure that we can hear one another?
Neil Gray tells us that the social impact investment in sport was on the agenda. This just so happened to be during a major cup tie for the team that he supports. In the real world, his excuses lack any credibility. SNP ministers are having us on. Is John Swinney seriously telling us that vital government business took place at these games?
First Minister.
President, as I said in my first answer, I expect ministers to be engaged with a variety of stakeholders in events and gatherings around the country, whether they are cultural, societal, social or sporting events. That has always been the case in every administration in the United Kingdom, and I would expect my ministers to do exactly that.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you, President Officer. John Swinney should put a stop to this nonsense and order the Health and Social Care Secretary to refund taxpayers. Neil Gray seems more interested in football freebies than doing the job that he's paid for. Scotland's NHS is in crisis and social care is broken. And for years we've said the SNP's National Care Service plans were a complete mess. In our very first exchange, I urged John Swinney to scrap it and to save taxpayers' money. And I'm very glad that he seems to have listened to some common sense for a change. But what has taken him so long?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, on the question of the work rate of ministers, Neil Gray has undertaken 347 engagements since he became the Health Secretary in February 2024, 34 of them in hospital and care facility visits, 17 surgery visits and meetings with GPs, 43 health board meetings, 24 conferences, receptions and speaking events, 152 general meetings, 15 meetings about health service pay, 62 meetings with MSPs, MPs, councillors and media engagements, and 5 sporting events. 5 sporting events out of 347 engagements. So I think that rather demonstrates that the Health Secretary is focused on the job, as one might put it. Now, on the issue of the National Care Service, I've made it very clear that the government is listening. My government is a listening government. We are listening to the views of members of the public. We're listening to the fact that people from disabled people's organisations, carers, service users are urging us to implement a National Care Service because they are dissatisfied, as I am, with the variation in care around the country, the postcode lottery. So that's what the National Care Service proposal is about, but the government will take its time to ensure that we get the proposals right and bring forward proposals that can command parliamentary support.
Russell Finlay.
The SNP have already wasted £29 million in a national care service that hasn't cared for a single person. These plans should be scrapped entirely and investment put directly into frontline social care where it is so desperately needed. SNP ministers have a reckless disregard for taxpayers' money. The Health and Social Secretary, Neil Gray, takes limos to the football. John Swinney wastes cash in a national care service that everybody knows is not going to work. It should not just be delayed, it should be binned. So why won't John Swinney put taxpayers' money into the front line where families will actually feel the benefit?
First Minister.
Well, that's precisely what this government has done, because we have increased the pay for social care workers to make working in the social care sector more attractive, so that we can deliver more social care packages for vulnerable members in the community so they can stay longer in their own homes. That's what we've done. And of course, when we brought forward those proposals, they were voted against by the Conservatives. So the Conservatives cannot come here and demand that I take action to improve the standards of social care service, which depend on the recruitment of social care employees, and to boost the size of the social care workforce, and then not be prepared to vote for them. That is what is called rank hypocrisy, and it's typical of the Conservatives.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
This morning, the Social Care Minister formally slammed the brakes on the SNP's botched National Care Service plans. And as I pointed out to the First Minister a month ago, these plans are opposed by care unions, care users, unions and experts, and are nothing more than an expensive power grab that would do nothing to improve the lives of care users. So far, around £30 million has been wasted due to SNP incompetence. That could have funded 1 million hours of care at home. Shocking when so many Scots are in urgent need of support. Instead, we've had years of chaos, delay, incompetence and waste. So will John Swinney apologise to all those who have lost out on vital support and to those who are actually getting their care packages withdrawn right now?
First Minister.
I'm not sure if I misheard Anna Sarwar, but I think he said that the National Care Service is opposed by care users. That is not the case. Disabled people's organisations, carers and service users press the government to take forward the National Care Service. I think it's really important that we reflect that. And when the Cabinet was down in Ayr just last week, we heard directly from members of the public, care users, encouraging us, indeed pleading with us, to implement the National Care Service. Now, I accept that there is a lot of opposition to the National Care Service from a variety of institutional stakeholders, and I recognise the issues within Parliament. That is why the Government is taking time to engage substantively on the issue of the National Care Service, to put in place the arrangements that will tackle the issues that I think Mr Sarwar and I agree upon, which is the unacceptable variation of care in different parts of the country and the postcode lottery that exists in the treatment and support of vulnerable people in our society.
Anna Sarwar.
The reality is that care users told the Health and Support Committee that they feel used by the government because this National Care Service plan actually doesn't deliver what they want to come from this government. Because, Presiding Officer, our care system is fundamentally broken. Over 9,000 Scots are waiting for an assessment or a care-at-home package right now. The number of care homes in Scotland has plummeted by almost a fifth, and their failure on delayed discharge has cost the Scottish taxpayer over £1 billion. And as we speak, Scots are seeing their care packages cut by this SNP government. And while they have been fighting for this failed plan, families have been fighting for basic reforms to support their loved ones, such as Ann's Law, the right to visit family members in care homes, or the right to respite. These could have been delivered by now, but instead the SNP deliberately tied these measures to this failed bill. So after years of chaos, waste and incompetence, will John Swinney finally ditch his discredited plan and instead immediately implement Ann's Law and the right to respite right now?
First Minister.
The issues that Mr Sarwar is concerned about the availability of care packages, are exactly the issues that I'm concerned about. It's why I've spent so much time since I became First Minister trying to tackle the issue of delayed discharge and to ensure that we have the resources in place to support the delivery of social care in our communities. That's therefore why I'm so concerned about the impact of the changes in the United Kingdom Government budget on employers' national insurance contributions. Because what that is going to do is going to increase the costs of the delivery of care by care providers. So if, for example, I cite to Mr Sarwar the comments of Donald McCaskill, the Chief Executive of Scottish Care, who said, "We are concerned that Scotland's many care organisations will struggle to pay the extra payments and may in turn end up going out of business." Now, none of us want to see that. So what we've got to make sure is that we have a sustainable approach to investment in social care in place. The Government has invested in that by improving pay rates, by investing in social care, and it's obviously a priority for the budget negotiations in which all of us are involved. So I would respectfully encourage and invite Mr Sarwar to work with the Government to make sure that the funding settlement from the United Kingdom Government is able to be deployed on the 1st of April to invest in social care, and I would encourage the Labour Party to vote for the Government's budget that will make provision for that to do so. Because not to do that will be for the Labour Party to turn their back on those who depend on social care in our country, and they've done that once already with the employers' national insurance contribution change.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, the First Minister knows that government departments and the Scottish Government is working with the Treasury to look at how many of those changes can support both the NHS and social care sector. But the reality is that the new tax changes have delivered over £750 million for health and social care this year and £1.72 billion for health and social care next year. Instead, we have a First Minister that demanded £70 billion of additional spending, but now opposes £40 billion of revenue-raising measures. Actually, it makes Liz Truss blush how economically illiterate this Finance Minister is. Presiding Officer, the process of the National Care Service has been a shambles and a disgrace. 3 years, 3 health ministers, 3 First Ministers and nothing to show for it. Just more SNP incompetence and waste that is holding Scotland back. From the housing emergency to the ferry fiasco, from the crisis in our NHS to the epidemic of violence and falling standards in our schools, Scots will be watching on this government and thinking, why can't they even get the basics right? John Swinney has wasted £1 million of taxpayers' money. He's broken promise after promise. So will he accept that this has been a shambles? And does he accept that this shows his government can deliver nothing more than failure, waste and incompetence?
First Minister.
The Labour Party's manifesto in 2024 said that they were supportive of the creation of a national care service. If this is what support for creating a national care service looks like, I'd hate to think what opposition to a national care service actually looks like. Now, Mr Sarwar said to me, Mr Sarwar raised the issue about employers' national insurance contributions. And Mr Sarwar knows, because I've explained it to him often enough, that what the UK Government should have done was they should have increased income tax. If they'd increased income tax, as we have done here, taken the honest decision, they would have avoided putting businesses in a position of being put out of business because of an increase in employer national insurance contributions. And that will have an effect. That will have an effect on care providers.
Let's hear the First Minister.
That will have an effect on care providers in our country. So Mr Sarwar is going to, week after week, as I take him through this, collide with a hard reality that what his UK Labour Government has done has increased the burdens on business, has made it difficult for businesses to contribute to social care. And the hard reality is that for all Mr Sarwar's rhetoric, what he's got to do is get behind this government's budget, because if he doesn't, he'll be turning his back on the vulnerable in our society.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister when the Cabinet will next meet.
First Minister.
The Cabinet will next meet on Tuesday, Presiding Officer.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Presiding Officer, we need to fix the care sector in our country, but the SNP have now wasted £30 million and 4 years on the wrong solution. I hope very much that this ministerial takeover of social care will now be allowed to wither on the vine. Presiding Officer, family carers are the backbone of support for thousands of Scots. Without their love and their commitment, our health and social care service would simply collapse. But just a third of them say that they have the support that they need. Thanks to Liberal Democrats, they now have the right to carers' leave to better balance work and caring responsibilities. And thanks to Ed Davey, carers in England will now be allowed to earn more at work before they lose their carers' allowance. They deserve that same deal here in Scotland, the right to earn more, to make life a bit easier, without the fear of having that government support taken away from them. So, with this crucial benefit being fully devolved to Scotland this winter, will the First Minister lift the earnings limit and end the cliff edge that is forcing so many carers into poverty?
First Minister.
President Officer, Mr Cole-Hamilton makes a number of reasonable points and important points about the dependence that the country has on family carers and the support that they provide. And the Government, of course, has taken a range of different steps during the devolution of social security benefits to this Parliament, where we have enhanced the provision that's available for carers, particularly with the enhancements to carers' allowance. And I'm glad that we've done that, and obviously we're committed to taking that forward in the forthcoming budget. I know and appreciate that Mr Cole-Hamilton has put that particular proposal in relation to the support to carers into the discussions that we are having on the forthcoming budget. The Government will engage constructively on that point, and we look forward to further discussions with Mr Cole-Hamilton and his colleagues on that question.
Question number 4, Evelyn Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what engagement the Scottish Government has had with the UK Government regarding reports from BBC Panorama that smart meters in Scotland are experiencing a disproportionate number of operational issues compared with elsewhere in the UK, due to differences in connection type used to send data to energy providers.
First Minister.
So I'm disappointed to hear that Scottish energy consumers have been disadvantaged in this way. Given that smart meter rollout is a reserved matter, we regularly raise issues affecting Scottish consumers with the UK Government, and will continue to urge them to take necessary action in ensuring all households with smart meters in Scotland are provided with full network access. We're also working with our consumer advice and advocacy partners to ensure they are equipped with the necessary knowledge and information to support consumers seeking help on managing or accessing smart meters.
Tweed.
I thank the First Minister for that response. In light of the UK Government's announcement that they are reviewing the rollout of smart meters, how will the Scottish Government seek to engage in the review to ensure Scottish consumers are protected?
First Minister.
So we regularly engage with the UK Government at both ministerial and official level on this point. The Minister for Climate Action, Alistair Allan, recently met with his UK counterpart to share outcomes from our Scottish Government Energy Consumers Roundtable, which brought together a range of stakeholders across the energy industry to discuss issues affecting Scottish consumers. We aim to hold this series of roundtables regularly and will continue to feed back to the UK Government the need for further consumer protection against the key challenges faced, including smart meter connectivity.
Liam MacArthur.
The First Minister rightly addresses the issue of the need to improve the communications network, but there's already a disparity in the rollout of smart meters that have seen 65% installations nationally as against 20% installations in places like Orkney. So would he back a regional approach to the rollout delivered through locally recruited suppliers, rather than the supplier-led model at the moment, which has been delivered through installers that are working for multiple suppliers?
First Minister.
I think that sounds like an entirely reasonable proposition, and I think these, as Mr MacArthur will appreciate from his extensive local knowledge, and particularly the uniqueness of the island's situations, that many of these propositions and services that are delivered through local engagement are more effective in being deployed on a more comprehensive basis. So I'm very happy to ask Dr Allan to raise that particular perspective in his dialogue with the United Kingdom Government on this question.
Question number 5, Rachel Hamilton.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to reports that its spending on private consultants has almost doubled in the space of 5 years.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government undertakes procurement of consultants of in-house resources or specialist skills where they are unavailable within the organisation. The figure quoted by Rachel Hamilton is, in the material at the weekend, is total spend with consultancy firms, which includes non-consultancy goods and services. The actual spend on consultants in 22-23 was £8,570,806, not £42 million. This is a decrease from the previous year and is at its second lowest level since 2018.
Rachel Hamilton.
First Minister, the spending on private consultants has been £160 million since 2018, and if there's a way to waste taxpayers' money, the SNP will manage it. Yeah. Public services are crumbling under their watch. John Swinney's response? Spend all that money on expensive private consultants with absolutely nothing to show for it. Does the First Minister believe that this is a good use of taxpayers' money?
First Minister.
I think there's a little problem in Parliament when members don't respond to the detail I then put on the record and then read out the question they had pre-scripted, which is actually debunked by what I put on the record. That's a bit of a problem, Presiding Officer, in the dialogue in Parliament.
Let's hear the First Minister.
Now, the levels of expenditure on consultants, as I said in my original answer, fell in 22-23 and was the second lowest level since 2018. Now, the wider category of expenditure that Rachel Hamilton is talking about includes measures such as the provision of the Household Survey and the Scottish Health Survey, which are crucial in determining information that informs government policy and also informs social policy development in our country. It's used crucially by academics. There's also other examples, such as the development of a case management system that helps us to deliver compensation to victims of sexual abuse via the redress scheme. I don't think members of Parliament would object to the government investing in measures such as that, which command all parties' support. So I simply assure Rachel Hamilton of two things. First of all, that the government will always, any government under my leadership, will always be careful about public money. That's why Ivan McKee, the Minister for Public Finance, has a mandate from me to challenge public expenditure at all times. And secondly, we will act to make sure that we maximise the resources that are available to members of the public to deliver public services. That's what people will get from a Swinney government.
Question number 6, Maggie Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to reported concerns that its proposed formula for calculating rent controls in the Housing Scotland Bill will require above-inflation rent rises for hundreds of thousands of renters, thus not tackling unaffordable rents.
First Minister.
Officer, the latest data shows that advertised average rents have increased in Scotland by 7.8% in the 12 months to September 2024. It is in this context that we set out our plans that a rent cap of CPI plus 1% up to a maximum of 6% will apply where rent control areas are in force. The maximum allowable increase of 6% will ensure that more significant rent increases cannot go ahead, and basing the cap on CPI ensures that we allow for a reflection of the cost to landlords of offering a property for rent. This approach strikes a balance between increasing protections for tenants with appropriate safeguards in a way that supports continued investment in rented housing in Scotland.
Maggie Chapman.
In 2022, the Cost of Living Tenant Protection Scotland Act provided two vital protections for tenants at a time of health and economic crisis: a moratorium on evictions and a rent freeze. Why does the government now believe that even the most extreme high rents should always keep going up faster than other prices? And why is the government now seeking to remove the power for councils to implement their own local rent freezes during times of spiralling prices and rents, which would help them tackle homelessness?
First Minister.
That's not what the government is doing. What the government is doing is putting in place protection for tenants through rent controls, and we're putting a mechanism in place to enable that to be the case. We cannot replicate the circumstances and arrangements that were in place during the COVID emergency when we are not living through a COVID emergency. We would never be able to sustain that in law or with legal challenge. So what we have to do is put in place a measure that provides protection for tenants but also enables investment. And the second issue is that the reason why we have resolved, and we've explained this to Parliament, to change the contents of the bill or to propose a change to the contents of the bill at stage 2 is to make sure that we can put certainty into the market so that we can attract further private investment in the housing stock of Scotland to enable us to tackle the housing emergency that our country faces.
Maggie Chapman, you have concluded. Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was pleased to host a briefing yesterday evening with Future Economy Scotland, debunking some myths around rent controls and highlighting that 82% of Scots back this SNP policy, which has the potential to have a positive impact on the economy as well as tenants' finances. Can the First Minister outline how the proposed rent cap method balances vital protection for tenants with certainty and reliability for the housing sector as a whole?
First Minister.
I'm very grateful to my colleague Emma Roddick for hosting that event with Future Economy Scotland, who have made such a contribution to the debate about rent controls in Scotland and provided such high-quality information which has informed the debate. I suspect some of that high-quality input has led the Local Government Housing and Planning Committee in its Stage 1 report, which was published this morning, to support the principle of using rent controls to ensure rents are affordable, making it easier for people to find a suitable home. The Government has listened to tenants, landlords and those who invest in rented homes and acted to deliver the clarity that they have been calling for. The approach that we've announced of limiting rent increases to CPI plus 1% up to a maximum of 6% where rent controls applies ensures protections for tenants from large rent increases and supports essential investment that maintains the quality and supply of homes for private rent. That is the type of pragmatism that I think the country is looking for.
Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Homes for Scotland have warned that the SNP's proposed changes to housing legislation will increase the cost of a new home by £30,000 through changes to rent controls. Previous changes to the rent cap stalled £3.2 billion worth of housing development. Reckless rent controls are not just driving away investment, they are harming our economy. With the SNP miles off meeting their 110,000 affordable homes target, why is this government failing to tackle the housing emergency, and why is this Parliament considering a housing bill that does not build a single home?
First Minister.
If Megan Gallagher wants homes to be built, then I suggest that she encourages her colleagues to vote for the government's budget. because it's the budget that gets homes built. That's how you get homes built. Let's
hear the First Minister.
That's how homes get built. There has to be public expenditure allocated to make sure we can support the affordable housing programme. So if members of Parliament are going to vote against the government's budget, there will be absolutely no way there is house building undertaken in this country. What this government is doing... First
Minister. Yep. Thank you. Can we ensure that we can hear, when a question has been put, that we can hear the response? First Minister. Yes.
I think the problem that the Labour Party and the Conservatives have got, because they're both shouting at me today, is they don't like the pragmatism that this government is now deploying. And the pragmatism this government is deploying, will see investment through the public expenditure if this crowd are prepared to vote for the government's budget. If they're not, then there'll be no affordable housing programme, and that's the reality that they've all got to face up to. And then when it comes to the legislation that's before Parliament, the Labour Party has got to make its mind up. Because in committee, they've supported a bill which recommends rent controls, and when the issue of rent controls came to this Parliament yesterday, the Labour Party voted against it. The Labour Party don't know whether they're coming or going.
We'll now move to constituency and general supplementaries. Excuse me, Mr Sarwar. We're moving to constituency and general supplementaries, and I call Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Labour Party have shown that they have no understanding of the unique needs of Scottish agriculture and have no interest in trying to understand. The removal of ring-fenced funding is a severe blow to Scotland's farming sector, coming on the back of the loss of multi-annual funding which was foisted on them by the Tories. Labour's decision shows they have little to no interest in farming, in food security or in the prosperity of rural Scotland and its economy. So can I ask the First Minister to outline his government's support for rural Scotland amidst this latest Westminster turmoil?
First Minister.
So, Officer, the implications for the farming sector of the post-Brexit arrangements are deeply damaging. Prior to Brexit, farmers in this country had 7 years of financial certainty. That has now been removed, and we only have, well, at this present moment, we have 1 year of financial certainty about the support that will be available. So what the Scottish Government will try to do is to provide as much certainty as we possibly can do, and we will set those provisions out in the budget on the 4th of December. We will also take forward the agreement of Parliament yesterday to challenge the United Kingdom Government about the changes to inheritance tax, which will be devastating for family farms in Scotland and will severely undermine the sustainability of family farms in our country. And yesterday at the Agri-Scot event at the Ingliston Showground, I made it absolutely clear that the Government will honour its commitment to return the £46 million to the Rural Affairs portfolio that the Government had to utilise to deal with short-term financial pressures in the last 2 financial years.
Sue Webber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, Unite the Union has found that 84% of... Sorry. I'll start again so you can hear me. First Minister, Unite the Union has found that 84% of bus drivers have experienced abuse in the past 12 months, with drivers frequently being beaten, spat upon and threatened by teenagers. A growing number of young people feel this shocking behaviour is acceptable. There must be stronger measures in place to protect our bus drivers. What action is the First Minister taking to protect drivers and to clamp down on the under-22s who abuse their free bus pass by committing antisocial behaviour?
First Minister.
Sir, I have every sympathy with the point that Sue Webber puts to me, because any form of violent behaviour in any shape or form, any form of aggressive behaviour in our society is completely and utterly unacceptable. And where that is deployed to bus drivers who are delivering a public service in our communities, it is wholly unacceptable, just as it was unacceptable for emergency workers to be attacked in the Niddrie area of Edinburgh as they were in and around bonfire night. So I am wholly supportive of the point that Sue Webber puts to me. I will explore the issue that she raises with me about young people who might abuse the use of the under-22 bus pass. I know from speaking to young people how valued that under-22 bus pass is by the overwhelming majority of young people who use that bus pass properly, never cause any bother, are absolutely a joy to have and to be on a bus with. But there will be a minority, and I'll explore the point that Sue Webber puts to me to determine if there is any action to take. Obviously, if there is any form of criminal conduct, that will be a matter for the police to address, and I'm sure Sue Webber will agree with me that we would expect the police to do so.
Claire Baker.
Presiding Officer, I refer members to my register of interest and my membership of Unite the Union. As Sue Webber has raised the issue of the survey, Unite has repeatedly called for stronger actions, and they are calling for the Scottish Government to convene a safety summit. So will the First Minister commit to that? And in relation to the First Minister's earlier statement on raising income tax, is he really saying that bus drivers and other workers in Scotland should be paying higher taxes in a way that would reduce the Scottish Government budget? And maybe he wants to clarify that point.
First Minister.
Well, I'm happy to explain my position on tax to the Labour Party. I believe that those with the broadest shoulders should pay more in taxation. That's what this government has legislated for. What the Labour Party now seems to support is a reduction in taxation in Scotland, which would cut public expenditure by £1.5 billion, and that would be wholly and completely reckless for our public services in Scotland. On the question of buses, I'm completely. This is a question of two halves. I'm completely in agreement with Claire Baker about the issue of support for bus drivers. They are delivering an essential service, and measures such as the free bus pass should not be in any way abused in terms of the experience of bus drivers. And as I said to Sue Webber, I'll explore those issues. I'm pretty certain the Transport Minister would be, well, actually, the Transport Minister will be happy to engage with Claire Baker and others on the question of addressing these issues of safety, and we will follow that up in the light of First Minister's questions.
Michael Matheson.
The First Minister will be aware that the Falkirk growth deal will be signed later on this afternoon by the Scottish and UK governments. The First Minister will also recognise that the Falkirk Council District is facing very significant economic challenge as a result of the decision to end refining in Grangemouth. Can I therefore say to the First Minister it is critical that both the Scottish Government and the UK Government provide as much economic support to Falkirk Council and the wider district as possible in order to meet these challenges. Can I therefore ask the First Minister if he could outline how the growth deal will meet the economic challenges the district is facing, and also whether the Scottish Government would work with Falkirk Council to identify some of the projects that could be expedited in order to make progress with them quickly in the next couple of years?
First Minister.
President Officer, I'm very pleased that the Deputy First Minister will sign the Falkirk and Grangemouth growth deal this afternoon, along with partners. Through that, we have committed £50 million of support to the region to deliver fair, green economic growth now and in the years to come. And I pay tribute to my colleague Michael Matheson for the efforts that he's put in to articulate the interests of the people of Falkirk and Grangemouth in the composition of that deal. Through this work, we will explore new technologies at Grangemouth. Mr Matheson will be familiar with the fact that ministers have engaged through the joint working at the Grangemouth Industry Board to identify those projects and to taking them forward through the Project Willow exercise, which is identifying further uses for the Grangemouth refinery. I have had further dialogue with Unite the Union about how the refinery's lifespan may be expanded, and I intend to persist with trying to do that to provide more opportunities to enable us to manage the transition effectively. There will also be £4 million of investment in Skills Transition Centre at Forth Valley College to ensure that we have the facilities required to deliver the necessary training, and £12 million towards the Greener Grangemouth programme, which will be overseen by the community and will deliver projects to improve the town.
Oliver Mundell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, yesterday afternoon, Police Scotland informed community organisations across Dumfries and Galloway that following a review of their resources, they will be withdrawing policing support and reducing their presence at a number of community and local events, such as riding of the marches, galas and volunteer-run festivals, events that they have supported for years, now in jeopardy. They state that Police Scotland continues to evolve nationally, and their risk assessment model means that such events are no longer considered a policing priority. So can I ask the First Minister, does he put this down to insufficient resources nationally, repeat cuts to rural areas under a centralised model, or is it just a view that community policing no longer matters?
Minister.
There's 2 points I would make in response to Mr Mundell. The first is that he asked me a number of detailed points that it would be inappropriate for me to answer because they are operational decisions for the Chief Constable to undertake. The second point I would make is that the Government has substantially increased resources for the police service on a constant basis to ensure that we have effective policing models in the country, and I know from my engagement with the Chief Constable that she believes fundamentally in the importance of community policing and is delivering that.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today is World Diabetics Day. In October, I hosted a roundtable diabetics technology and heard firsthand the difference technology can make in quality of life for those with type 1 diabetes. But even with the new funding, waiting lists are too long. Lothian alone is forecast to have 1,200 adults waiting for a closed-loop system by 2025. England and Wales have 5-year plans to get this technology to those who need it. Where is the Scottish Government's long-term plan?
First Minister.
Well, these technologies are being rolled out and they're being implemented. I know from my own constituency caseload the difference that these technologies make, and obviously that's a priority for the Government in relation to the investment that we take forward. I can assure Mr Chowdhury of the importance the Government attaches to tackling waiting times so that people can have the support they require at the earliest possible opportunity. But of course we can only deploy the resources after the 1st of April if there is parliamentary agreement around the budget. So I invite Mr Chowdhury to encourage his colleagues to support the Government in the budget that we bring forward later in December.
Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I'm sure that you will, like me, welcome the hundreds of activities taking place across Scotland this week as part of Scottish Careers Week. And these events are a great opportunity to showcase the work by partners to help people make a positive education and career choice that will help shape their future. I believe we can even try out some augmented reality tools on show at the Skills Development Scotland reception in Parliament today after FMQs. Will you join me then in welcoming the commitment not only of the young people who have weathered the challenges of the last few years to remain focused on their career goals, but also of the many careers and teaching professionals whose dedicated support is invaluable to all of those looking to make the right choices for their futures?
Minister.
Very happy to associate myself with Mr Kidd's remarks about the young people who have engaged substantively in career development and to support them in their efforts, and I welcome the arrangements that are in Parliament for members to engage on this question. The Government works in a very focused way to make sure that we maximise the level of positive destinations for young people leaving our school system. These are at very high levels just now, and that's obviously assisted by the advice that's available through the career system, and the Government will continue to support that work.
Lee Carson.
Bail-bound Brian Gibson has been trapped in a hospital in Stranraer for 3 months. He is one of only many unfortunate victims of delayed discharge across Scotland. Brian can't go home and nowhere can be found for him to live. Wheatley Housing, his landlord, has said it doesn't have the money to carry out the required adaptations. Wheatley applied for £3 million at a fund normally confirmed in June, but only got word in October that after months of delay, they eventually are only going to receive £669,000 from the Government, compared to £945,000 the previous year. Social landlords and housing associations have suffered a 25% cut in the aid and adaptation budget this year. Can I ask the First Minister to investigate Mr Gibson's case and review the unacceptable and damaging cuts in this hugely important fund, which is leaving people stuck in hospital or struggling in their own homes before the situation becomes even more intolerable for people like Brian?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, if Mr Carson would like to drop me details about his constituent's situation, I'd be happy to look into and see what we can do to assist it. Mr Carson raises a significant and serious issue because one of the ways that we can tackle delayed discharge is by doing exactly what Mr Carson invites me to do, which is to provide more support for adaptation of properties so that people can sustainably return to their homes. And I'm aware that there are inadequacies in the adaptations budget. That is because the government has had to take a lot of difficult decisions this year to deal with the pressures of inflation and public sector pay. I can assure Mr Carson that the issue of housing adaptations is a very significant priority and the subject of discussion between the Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice and the Finance Secretary and I in relation to the finalisation of the Government's budget. And it's just another reason why Mr Carson should think about supporting the Government's budget when the time comes.
Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Over more than a decade of Tory austerity, the UK Government imposed cruel and punitive welfare reforms, with a further plan to demonise disabled people or people with a long-term illness through changes to work capability assessment. What dialogue has the Scottish Government had with Labour about dropping these cruel Tory welfare plans, which appear to still be on the cards?
First Minister.
So the Scottish Government doesn't support the changes to the work capability assessments that are being made. We will take forward dialogue and engagement with the UK Government to advance the concerns that disabled people's organisations have put to us and which Rona Mackay has articulated powerfully in Parliament today, and we will act to ensure that we provide the support necessary for those who face these challenges.
And Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I've repeatedly raised NHS Grampians ambulance stacking crisis in this chamber, and I've been assured by this SNP government that action is being taken to address it. But this week, the Chief Executive of the Scottish Ambulance Service has warned there has been, and he said, little meaningful progress towards reducing long waits for ambulances outside ARI's A&E. Enough is enough, First Minister. Lives are at stake, and especially as winter approaches. What urgent action is the Scottish Government going to take with NHS Grampian to fix this mess?
First Minister.
Let me assure Tess White that the Government is very focused on addressing one of the issues which contributes to the problem that Tess White raises with me, which is the extent of delayed discharges in our hospital system, because that essentially creates congestion within hospitals. It means that patients cannot be moved from A&E into other more suitable hospital accommodation, and there is then congestion at A&E, which results in some of the long waits that Tess White has raised with me for ambulances. So the Government is absolutely focused on reducing delayed discharge as a significant contribution to addressing that issue.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Ruth Maguire. There will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the gallery and the chamber to do so.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We're committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please, subscribe to and share our channel, or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.